Derrota total.
Total defeat. Ukraine and its Western sponsors, NATO and the European Union, have finally capitulated. After nearly 4 years of a brutal and unnecessary war, we are finally witnessing what we have predicted on this channel for so long: the total defeat of Ukraine, NATO, and the European Union. The 28-point peace plan proposed by President Donald Trump practically sets out all the conditions demanded by Russia. In this sense, the so-called Trump peace plan actually represents a surrender of Ukraine, NATO, and the European Union to Russia. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. From Berlin, Germany, we begin Demolishing Myths Live.
Comenzamos demoliendo mitos en vivo. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos y
Thank you very much for joining us, and please remember to help us with a thumbs up against censorship, as well as through subscriptions, memberships, and for those who wish, via our PayPal account. Total defeat of Ukraine, NATO, and the European Union. Indeed, the peace plan proposed by U.S. President Donald Trump represents a capitulation, or in other words, a declaration of surrender. A total defeat for both Ukraine and NATO, as well as the European Union. And it also represents a victory for Russia, but a relative one, not a total victory. In general, we tend to interpret war through sports-like categories.
la guerra a partir de categorías deportivas, en el deporte, en un partido de fútbol, béisbol, básquetbol.
In sports, whether in a soccer, baseball, basketball, or tennis match, if there is a total loser, there must necessarily be, on the other side, in the opponent's place, a total winner. However, wars and geopolitics do not always follow that binary logic. It may well happen that there is a loser, and on the other side another loser, or as in this case, a total loser, a total defeat for Ukraine, NATO, and Europe, and for the moment, a relative victory for Russia. This does not necessarily mean that if Russia were to validate this peace agreement, that currently relative victory could not, over time, turn into a total victory, but no longer through military action, rather through political action.
Sino a través de la acción política. Presentemos los puntos del plan.
Let's present the points of the peace plan proposed by Trump, and then go through, actor by actor, the meaning of an agreement under these terms, or similar ones, to finally provide an explanation of this total defeat of NATO, and for the moment, the relative victory of Russia. Let's begin with the text published very recently, containing the 28 points of Trump's peace plan for Ukraine and Russia. Of course, this so-called peace plan, once again, reflects the perspective of the United States government.
La perspectiva del gobierno de los Estados Unidos. En realidad, difícilmente podría Estados Unidos presentar.
In reality, it would be difficult for the United States to present a peace plan when it was the United States itself that drove this war. However, since taking office, the Trump administration, despite persisting in its military and economic support for Ukraine, has simultaneously played this dual role of participant and mediator, and therefore presents this as a peace plan rather than, in fact, a declaration of surrender by the main promoter of the war. The main participant in this war, the United States. This is how the Trump administration markets the plan, but remember the context. So let's begin point by point by recalling that Russia basically set as a political condition, first and foremost, Ukraine's neutrality regarding the war. That is the reason this war began. As we have always emphasized countless times, what we are witnessing here is not Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine as a result of Russian imperialism, but rather, in this case, NATO's war of aggression against Russia, due to its eastward expansion, its military expansion toward Russia's borders, particularly toward Ukraine, where Russia had drawn a red line. And after countless attempts at negotiation to reach an agreement to halt NATO's advance toward Russia, what the Russians describe as a special military operation finally began. That is the background of the war.
el trasfondo de la guerra y cuáles las condiciones entonces, lógicamente, de Rusia para la finalización.
And what are Russia's conditions then, logically, for ending the war? First of all, Ukraine's neutrality with respect to NATO. Naturally, also its demilitarization, because otherwise that neutrality would have no basis, right? Because any declaration of neutrality, accompanied by an arms race and growing military development, would for Russia, likewise, create an existential threat on its border, logically. Therefore, neutrality with respect to NATO. Secondly, demilitarization. And thirdly, denazification. And in this way, the Russians basically conceptualize the removal of Ukrainian ultranationalism from power in Ukraine.
Del poder en Ucrania. Y en cuarto lugar comienzan las demandas.
And fourth, Russia's territorial demands begin. Demands that naturally evolved as the war went on. Initially, Russia set as a condition the recognition of Crimea, already annexed to Russia, and with more than 90% of the Crimean population reportedly supporting that annexation, according to U.S. surveys. Secondly, Russia demanded the independence of the Ukrainian oblasts controlled by pro-Russian forces after the 2014 Maidan, the separatist provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk.
Las provincias separatistas, Donetsk y Lugansk, primero Rusia quería su reconocimiento, después.
First, Russia wanted its recognition. Later, it carried out the annexation of both separatist republics of Donetsk and Luhansk to Russia. And finally, it also established the annexation of two additional provinces, Kherson and Zaporizhia, still held by Russia up to about half of each. Unlike Luhansk, already fully captured, and Donetsk, captured in more than half of its territory. Those are the conditions, and that's how this document begins. Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed. Point number one, basically. This determines the continuity of the Ukrainian state's existence in a different way, but Ukraine does not disappear, something, by the way, never claimed by Russia. Number two, a comprehensive non-aggression agreement will be concluded between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe.
Concluirá un acuerdo de no agresión integral entre Rusia, Ucrania y Europa. Se considerarán resueltas todas las ambigüedades de los últimos años.
All ambiguities from recent years will be considered resolved. Well, an agreement between the parties. Number three, it is expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries and that NATO will not expand further. Here lies the most important compromise and the fundamental condition demanded by Russia, the end of NATO's expansion. Russia lacks expansionist intent and once again began this war as a result of NATO's expansion. Therefore, if this determines the end of NATO's expansion, Russia, without any problem, can validate an agreement, including the end of any possibility of territorial advancement by Russia, as long as NATO honors this commitment.
La OTAN responda a este compromiso. Número 4, se celebrarán un diálogo entre Rusia.
Number 4, a dialogue will be held between Russia and NATO with the mediation of the United States to resolve all security issues and create conditions for de-escalation in order to ensure global security, increase opportunities for cooperation, and promote future economic development. Well, here we see another important underlying issue in this conflict, not just the specific question of NATO's expansion toward Russia and Russia's red line in Ukraine, but rather the beginning of a dialogue about the entire European security architecture, something necessary and also demanded by Russia, though not under the specific conditions of this war.
Por Rusia, aunque no en las condiciones específicas para esta guerra. Así que Rusia muy bien podría convalidar esto, lo cual...
So Russia could very well validate this, which only expresses the willingness for dialogue on these issues. After that, negotiations can begin and still not produce any agreement, but at least that possibility is established. Number 5, Ukraine will receive reliable security guarantees. Security guarantees is the key phrase for the Ukrainians, for the Europeans, and for the warlords, even for the Americans as well, who keep hammering on the issue of security guarantees in the sense of NATO intervention. And here this term does appear, security guarantees, but it is not specified what kind of guarantees or in what form, only a vague formulation of reliable security guarantees and nothing more than that.
Confiables y nada más que eso. Número 6. El tamaño de las Fuerzas Armadas de Ucrania estará limitado a...
Number 6. The size of Ukraine's armed forces will be limited to 600,000 personnel. and this responds to Russia's demand for the demilitarization of Ukraine. With this number of troops, it would decrease significantly. However, even so, this figure, clearly negotiable in this first draft of the agreement, could be subject to a greater reduction. Very likely, if the Russians begin serious negotiations on this basis, they will want a much larger cut, much larger. Of course, if I were in Putin's place, I wouldn't want more than 200,000 troops, or even the complete absence of armed forces in Ukraine. But anyway, with these 600,000, the second demand previously mentioned by Russia, the demilitarization of Ukraine, begins to be addressed. Number 7. Ukraine agrees to enshrine in its constitution that it will not join NATO, and NATO agrees to include in its statutes a provision stating that Ukraine will not be admitted in the future. Clear enough. Remember that, right after the coup d'etat against Yanukovych through the Maidan, President Poroshenko introduced a reform to the Ukrainian constitution that openly proclaimed joining NATO. Well, this would disappear, which means the prospect of Ukraine joining NATO would vanish, but it would also disappear from NATO's side, from NATO's own declaration, the possibility of Ukraine's admission, not only now, but in the future as well. That recalls, in that launch, the carrot offered by NATO to Ukraine, that Ukraine in the future could formalize its entry into NATO. They reject it, and they reject it in the present because that entry would immediately trigger a war between NATO and Russia. Because if a country at war, Ukraine, joins NATO, then all of NATO would have to respond to the war on behalf of that country, in accordance with Article 5 on Collective Defense of the North Atlantic Treaty, NATO's founding seminal treaty. Therefore, what was NATO's promise to Ukraine? You can't join now, but you will be able to in the future. Well, this would also disappear with this agreement, which means that once again, one of Russia's conditions would be met. Number 8. NATO agrees not to station troops in Russia. Well, another condition met, specifying and fulfilling Russia's demand. Number 9. European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland. In fact, Poland already hosts a NATO missile base. Stationing fighter jets there wouldn't really pose a problem for Russia. There are already Polish fighter jets, of course. Number 10. This is interesting as one of the few conditions favorable to Ukraine. Sorry, no, this one isn't favorable to the United States. This is a clause inserted by the United States. Later on, the guarantee of Ukraine's entry into the European Union will appear, since it was written as EU, hence the confusion between the United States and the European Union. This specifically is a guarantee imposed obviously in the drafting by the United States for the payment of compensation. The United States will receive compensation for the guarantee. If Ukraine invades Russia, it will lose the guarantee. If Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to a coordinated and decisive military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated, recognition of new territory will be revoked, and all other benefits of this agreement will be withdrawn. If Ukraine launches a missile against Moscow or St. Petersburg without justified cause, the security guarantee will be invalidated. Well, here, the supposed involvement of the United States in the event of a Russian advance after the signing of this agreement. But it doesn't establish the obligation of that military response. If Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to a coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated. The United States could respond militarily by once again sponsoring Ukraine with weapons, but not necessarily through direct participation, right? Here, yes, as mentioned before, condition 11, or point number 11, Ukraine is eligible to become a member of the European Union and receive preferential access. Attention, Europeans. This will determine the final collapse of the European Union, without a doubt. But this is one of the important points in some way beneficial for Ukraine. Russia never rejected Ukraine's entry into the European Union.
ingreso de Ucrania a la Unión Europea. Número 2, un paquete global de medidas contundentes para la reconstrucción.
Number 2, a comprehensive package of strong measures for the reconstruction of Ukraine that includes, well, among other things, the creation of a fund and so on, withdrawal of military forces, well, the whole U.S. business here, right? Wrapped up in this global package of measures for Ukraine's reconstruction, the business of war, as always. Further down, point number 13, Russia will be reintegrated into the global economy. Lifting of sanctions and an economic cooperation agreement with the United States. Russia will be invited to rejoin the G8. Well, basically, the end of sanctions. Number 14, the frozen funds will be used as follows. 100 billion Russian dollars will be invested in U.S.-led initiatives for reconstruction and investment in Ukraine.
Iniciativas lideradas por Estados Unidos para la reconstrucción e inversión de Ucrania. Estados Unidos recibirá el 50% de ganancias.
The United States will receive 50% of the profits from this initiative. Europe will contribute another $100 billion to increase the investment available in Ukraine. Well, of the $300 billion that were frozen, $200 billion will be returned, and $100 billion supposedly used for the reconstruction business. This, of course, will also be subject to further discussion by Russia. Point number 15. A U.S.-Russian working group on security issues will be established to promote and ensure compliance with all the provisions of this agreement. Something formal.
De todas las disposiciones de este acuerdo, algo formal. Punto 16, Rusia consagrará en la ley su política.
Point 16, Russia will enshrine in law its policy of non-aggression toward Europe and Ukraine. Fine, something formal. Point 17, the United States and Russia will agree to extend the validity of treaties on non-proliferation and nuclear arms control, including the START I's treaty, and most likely also New START, the continuation of START I. Well, here there are substantive issues, undoubtedly demanded by Russia, but within the framework of a broader negotiation, not within the framework of the war in Ukraine, although it is part of the background. This reflects the U.S. reconsideration of its policy toward Russia.
Reconsideración estadounidense de su política con respecto a Rusia, ¿sí? Como producto de la victoria militar de Rusia.
As a result of Russia's military victory in Ukraine, the United States is finally softening its stance on nuclear agreements and is once again beginning negotiations to establish accords like in the past, when in fact, at least since George W. Bush onward, the United States had been abandoning one nuclear and missile agreement after another, as part of this global imperial geopolitics of expansion and rejection of any counterpart, any negotiation, the existence of other centers of power. Well, there is finally an acknowledgement of all that here, with the reactivation of negotiations on nuclear issues, as Russia wanted and as China has wanted for some time. Number 18. Ukraine agrees to be a non-nuclear state in accordance with the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, guaranteeing a denuclearized Ukraine.
Una Ucrania desnuclearizada. De esta manera desaparece la locura de Ucrania.
In this way, Ukraine's madness, at some future point even declared by Zelensky, of wanting nuclear weapons disappears, if this is completely and absolutely eliminated here. Number 19. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be put into operation under the supervision of the OEA, and the electricity produced will be distributed equally between Russia and Ukraine, 50-50. Good. Number 20. Both countries commit to implementing educational programs in schools and society aimed at promoting understanding and tolerance toward different cultures and at eliminating racism and prejudice. Therefore, respect for the Russian language in Ukraine is established here. That is the underlying problematic issue, another Russian demand included within the denazification of Ukraine. Finally, in point 21, the issues related to the territories begin.
Las cuestiones ligadas a los territorios. Hasta acá, en lo político, todas las demandas.
Up to this point, politically, all of Russia's demands have been accepted, and here is where the territorial issues begin. First point within point 21. A. Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk will be recognized as Russian de facto, even by the United States. First important point. Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk. True, de facto this does not imply formal recognition, much less by Ukraine, but it does mean recognition of the existence of these provinces as part of Russia, even by the United States, and everything else is merely symbolic. So once again, Russia comes out ahead here. Point B. Kherson and Zaporizhzhia will remain frozen along the line of contact, which will mean a de facto recognition along that line. Perhaps the only point with a relative victory for Russia, since remember that in Russia's latest statement regarding the conditions for ending the war, they had proclaimed the inclusion of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia in full. This would determine the inclusion of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia in their current state, in the sense of freezing the front line. What was taken by Russia stays with Russia, the rest with Ukraine. And in point C, Russia will renounce other agreed territories it controls outside the 5 regions. Well, this is basically in Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, and Sumy. Still very small pieces, although strategic, yet still very small.
Si bien estratégicos, muy pequeños. Aún, los rusos pueden realizar esta concesión sin problemas.
The Russians can make this concession without any problem. In fact, in no statement have they yet declared these regions as part of Russia, so they could make this concession easily. The Ukrainian forces will withdraw from the part of Donetsk they currently control, and this withdrawal area will be considered a demilitarized buffer zone, neutral, and internationally recognized as territory belonging to the Russian Federation. Russian forces will not enter this demilitarized zone. Well, here is one of Putin's conditions, the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Donetsk. This is granted, but on the condition that Russia does not create a military occupation. This might be acceptable, which means, once again, a condition imposed on Ukraine by Russia. Number 22. After agreeing on future territorial arrangements, both Russia and Ukraine commit not to alter them by force. Number 23. Russia will not prevent Ukraine from using the Dnieper River for commercial activities, and agreements will be reached on the free transport of grain through the Black Sea. Russia could easily approve this. Number 24. A humanitarian committee will be established to resolve outstanding issues regarding prisoners, detained civilians, and a family reunification program. All right, issues agreed upon by both sides. 25, and pay attention to this. Ukraine will hold elections in 100 days. Goodbye to Zelensky, just over 3 months, just like that. So what a change with this plan. It's something else. Number 26. All parties involved in this conflict will receive full amnesty for their actions during the war and agree not to file claims or consider complaints in the future. This is particularly tough for Ukraine and for Europe, since they keep hammering on about Russia's alleged war crimes and the need for prosecution. Goodbye to all that. 27. This agreement will be legally binding, and its implementation will be supervised and guaranteed by the Peace Council, chaired by Trump. Sanctions will be imposed in case of non-compliance. 28. Once all parties approve this memorandum, the ceasefire will take effect immediately after both sides withdraw to the agreed points to begin implementing the agreement. Well, specifically, after this long review, basically all the points are those demanded by Russia, with the exception of one halfway, the inclusion, the annexation of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, only in the part already taken by Russia. Which part of Zaporizhzhia is taken by Russia? Basically this one here. If you follow me, here's the division of provinces. All right, here's Luhansk, already fully taken. Here's Donetsk. This is the part taken by Russia. This is the missing piece. Perhaps here, with the last significant Ukrainian defensive military concentration in this area.
Defensiva ucraniana de peso en esta zona, Ucrania abandonaría esto y todo esto.
Ukraine would abandon this, and all of this would once again end up in Russian hands without a military presence, but it would appear as Russian territory under Russian administration. Over here, Zaporizhzhia already taken throughout this region. This part is still missing for Russia, with very strong advances lately here and here. They could conquer this relatively quickly in the context of a war of attrition, right? The territories of Zaporizhia up to the Dnipro, but not the other bank of the Zaporizhia Oblast, which includes part of the capital city of Zaporizhia. Remember that the city has two banks, one here and another here, right? Well, then this would mean for now that the entire city of Zaporizhia would remain within Ukraine, and the rest, everything down from there, would go to Russia. And something similar would happen with Kherson.
Rusia y algo parecido con Gerson, ¿sí? Aquí Gerson tomada.
Here is Kherson. Kherson practically taken over in most of its territory, but with this small piece still not captured. And the capital, by the way, located on the other side right here. Remember that Russia conquered it in 2022 very quickly, but this bridgehead later required a very strong military effort to defend. So Russia strategically withdrew in that famous operation commanded by Surovikin in order to focus on the Donbass, with great success, right? So, this part for Russia and this part for Ukraine, right?
Esto para Rusia y esto para Ucrania, ¿sí? Con lo cual, básicamente en términos territoriales, todo.
Which means, basically, in territorial terms, everything requested by Russia, except for these little bits, and Russia's withdrawal from the territories not yet claimed. For example, Dnipropetrovsk, here, this little bit here, sorry, a bit more, because no, this part here, the lower part, this is already Zaporizhia. So this, and these tiny little bits here in Dnipropetrovsk, further north in Kharkiv, well, the return, first of all, of these salients, like here in Bobchansk, this part here, and obviously also the return of these territories in this area, located to the left of Luhansk. And finally, in Sumy, up here, the return of this.
Aquí más arriba, la devolución de esto, ¿sí? Con la excepción de aquí, de esta zona aquí con...
With the exception of this area here, with Kupiansk, everything else is practically insignificant for Russia. And once again, this draft creates a basis for negotiation. From this, Russia could determine, for example, that if it withdraws from Sumy, if it withdraws from the northern part of Kharkiv, up here, this little area here, but does not withdraw from the part of Kharkiv located to the right of the Dnieper River, this one here, considered a natural defense. Therefore, specifically, we can undoubtedly conceptualize this proposed part, this peace plan, as a recognition of NATO's defeat, as a capitulation, as the acknowledgement of the total defeat of Ukraine, NATO, and the European Union, although with different impacts for each party.
Distintos impactos para las partes. Para Ucrania, sin dudas, esto aparece como...
For Ukraine, without a doubt, this seems like a total and absolute defeat, with no nuances. The country appears devastated, doomed to failure, and soon it will be abandoned and no longer remembered, beyond the business ventures launched by the United States and Europe in its reconstruction. At best, perhaps not even that. Thus, from the Ukrainian side, we witness this agreement as a tragedy, but at this point, even a less tragic, less terrible tragedy than one reached later. As we have known, and have emphasized for 3 years back when we participated in Deutsche Welle before our censorship, the sooner Ukraine reaches an agreement with Russia, the better for Ukraine.
El acuerdo de Ucrania con Rusia para Ucrania mejor. Cuanto más tiempo, más territorio perdido, más gente muerta, más estructura.
The more time passes, the more territory lost, the more people dead, the more their economy destroyed. So total and absolute defeat for Ukraine. A tragedy, but yes, the sooner it happens, a tragedy that's a little less tragic, a little less terrible. Still an absolute defeat. For Zelensky, well, total defeat as well. His replacement within 100 days, according to this plan, and afterward his condemnation to ostracism. In Ukraine, he probably won't be able to appear on the streets, won't be able to show himself publicly, because he'll be largely blamed for the disaster of the war. The Americans don't like him much. He knows too many secrets. Same with the British. Obviously, neither do the Russians. So a very difficult situation, even in terms of his own survival, right?
Una situación muy difícil incluso con miras a su supervivencia, ¿no? Pensable tal vez un exilio en Israel,
Conceivable, perhaps, an exile in Israel like the rest of those involved in the current corruption case. Conceivable, but even so, beyond any money stolen by this man in multi-million amounts, a dark future, no doubt. And maybe no future at all, huh? Careful. Watch out for open windows, balconies, banana peels on the floor, slips. Be careful, especially with the Western intelligence services. On Europe's side, we're also witnessing a total and absolute defeat.
También presenciamos una derrota total y absoluta. Europa como producto de esta guerra parece
Europe, as a product of this war, seems deteriorated, appears broken, in recession, in a strong process of deindustrialization, with high inflation, with a fractured society, and ruling classes detached from the problems of ordinary citizens. It also appears completely subjugated and, by its own choice, humiliated before the world. The role dreamed of by these corrupt and inept European leaders regarding Europe's place in the world, and this idea of we must take part in the decisions, and, for example, making visits to China to lecture the Chinese.
Amonestar a los chinos, ¿sí? Primero, me recuerdo cuando von der Leyen.
First, I remember when von der Leyen, even Macron, made visits to China, and while asking, please help us in the war, at the same time, with their finger raised, they scolded the Chinese as if they were some sort of global imperial authority, with the right to decide who is in and who is out. Challenges, sanctions, well, the Chinese were laughing their heads off. Faced with China, the main world power in economic terms, without a doubt, and increasingly in political and military terms as well, Europe looks like a dwarf. Yes, it's laughable, but still. Because of all this, today Europe, besides being ruined, also appears humiliated, by itself or by its ruling and dominant classes, both politically and economically. And if it once took part among the great powers that made the big global decisions, from now on, no more.
Derrota total para Europa.
So a total defeat for Europe. And be careful, careful with the possible implosion of the European Union now, right? Be careful with the possible implosion of the European Union, because under the little banner of Russia, 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 Putin, 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 right? Everyone was presenting the same line and seemed to be moving in the same direction. Aside from some debate over who was more anti-Russian or less anti-Russian, but all of them anti-Russian. More or less, this created a convergence among the positions of the countries.
Más o menos, esto generaba una convergencia entre las posiciones de los países. Cuando desaparezca
when this fictitious convergence disappears, the clashes will start again, and they will do so on the basis of a rearmament process and a war on the continent. And beware of the beginning of conflicts between European countries, among others, between Germany and Poland. Be careful with this. Pay attention, because remember that the United States and NATO carried out the attack on the German Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines, causing terrible damage. The Poles not only initially reacted with joy to this, but later, when Germany began a political investigation, but an investigation nonetheless, into those responsible, it determined the existence of an alleged Ukrainian citizen who had taken refuge in Poland and requested his extradition.
Solicitó su extradición. Alemania solicitó la extradición.
Germany requested the extradition, and Poland rejected it with very harsh words, right? As if saying, good thing, the destruction of the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines by this Ukrainian man. We're going to help him here, protecting him with refugee status. So this could lead, once the anti-Russian madness is over, to a serious conflict. Also, let's remember that the pro-Russian bloc within Europe no longer consists of just one country with Hungary, but three. We can also locate Hungary on the map, Hungary on one side with Orbán.
Hungría, por un lado, con Orbán. Él por aquí.
Him over here, Hungary here, Slovakia, and now the Czech Republic, all these countries. Let's be a bit more precise. Hungary, Slovakia over here, and now the Czech Republic. And maybe before long, France as well. In Germany with the AfD, less likely, but still possible. Why not? The Netherlands? Why not? Even Austria here, the Netherlands over here. This supposedly pro-Russian internal bloc could also create a very, very difficult situation within Europe. It could lead to internal conflicts. And finally, with the end of the war in Ukraine, eventually from day one, the European Union and the states complicit with the European Union, like Germany, like France, and so on, suddenly lack justification for their rearmament programs. The European Union's rearmament program, 800 billion euros for the entire Union, plus, for example, Germany's own program of 500 billion euros.
El programa de Alemania para sí misma de 500.000 millones de euros. De repente, ¿cuál es la justificación de esos programas?
Suddenly, what is the justification for those programs? The Russian boogeyman, the Russian ghost, has now made an agreement with Ukraine and the United States. What reasoning will they present to their societies to carry out, or rather, to persist in, the path of widespread impoverishment of the population, to channel European funds, and in this case German funds, toward the arms industry, not even the European one, but the American one? What argument will they present? They completely lack one. They no longer have the Russian boogeyman. They no longer have the ghost of Russia as a justification for this rearmament. So Europe, once again, stands as one of the great losers, a total and absolute defeat.
Una de las grandes derrotadas, una derrota total y absoluta. Finalmente, Estados Unidos.
Finally, the United States. How can we characterize the defeat of the United States? Well, I conceptualize it as a managed defeat, a controlled defeat. Why? First, because of the false role of mediator. It may formally appear as a mediator, but the United States sponsored and continues to sponsor this war. So yes, Trump, for his audience, may create the feeling or image of the United States ending the war. But this war was driven by the United States, and therefore its defeat also implies the defeat of Ukraine, the United States ally, its proxy, its puppet. It necessarily implies a defeat for the United States as well.
Manejada, sí, presentada como una derrota ajena en el sentido de
managed, yes. Presented as someone else's defeat, in the sense of, we, the Americans, under Trump's government, abandoned this Biden war. False. But, well, that's how it's presented. So the defeat was managed. But on the other hand, this war, as a catalyst for geopolitical conflicts on a global scale, ultimately exposed the weakness of the United States. Until this war, the United States appeared to be the master of everything and could determine a conflict here, a conflict there, a war in Europe, a war in Ukraine, whatever it wanted. Well, even with Trump, this war, in the eyes of the world, exposed the weakness of the United States and of current geopolitics, right?
En la geopolítica actual, ¿sí? No porque haya abandonado por completo su rol de potencia.
Not because it has completely abandoned its role as a global power. No, not at all. But it no longer seems to be alone, and this war made that very clear. It exposed the existence of a multipolar world and the fact that the United States cannot start a war in Europe whenever it wants. Sorry, whenever it wants, whenever it can. And that if it does, it will very likely collide with Russia, or with Iran, or with China, against which it began with a tariff policy and ultimately had to back down on all of them. So, a managed defeat, a controlled defeat for the United States, and the possible return of a much more bellicose administration, whether from the Democrats of the Hillary Clinton wing, the Obama wing, the neoconservative Hawk wing, or even an electoral victory by Marco Rubio in the next term, and the return of the neoconservative Republicans.
Y la vuelta de los republicanos neoconservadores. Y ahí comenzaría todo de cero, ¿sí?
And that's where everything would start from scratch. These are the defeats. In the case of the United States, a managed one. Now on the other side, the side of the winners. Well, before presenting my hypothesis about Russia's relative victory, I first want to present China as one of the winners. Because China, from the war in Ukraine onward, played a leading role in a remarkable geopolitical rise. China began this war as a rising power. It didn't participate directly in the conflict, but when it began, it was already emerging as a growing power. It represented that. Well, now even more so. The Europeans themselves were lining up, waiting for meetings with Xi Jinping, pleading please for his intervention regarding Russia, the Americans too.
los estadounidenses también, el rol de China en la economía.
China's role in the economy. From this war, it becomes clearer than ever. The Chinese are shipping parts, not only for the construction of Russian and Ukrainian drones, crucial for both sides in this war, but also in the context of this rearmament and the arrival of Trump and his tariff policy. The Chinese decided to stop shipping rare earths, to stop sending minerals for the U.S. defense industry. And suddenly, the Americans were left trembling, desperate, waiting for the minerals needed above all for the production of magnets, indispensable not only for the military industry, but also for the automotive and many other industries. Therefore, indirectly, I believe this positioned China as one of the winners of this conflict, without a doubt. And finally, Russia. And here's my hypothesis. This agreement would represent for Russia a relative victory for the moment, which in no way means that this relative victory could not soon turn into a total one.
No pueda generar una victoria total, ¿sí? Así como en contraposición a la derrota total de la OTAN.
Just as opposed to the total defeat of NATO, the European Union, and Ukraine. But for now, we are witnessing a relative victory. Why? Well, victory clearly because Russia drew a red line against NATO's advances. That's where the idea of victory comes from. This war repositioned Russia among the world's great powers, as one of the global decision-makers, undoubtedly not only in Eurasia, but also in Africa, Latin America, in its relationship with China, and so on. And finally, victory, naturally, also because most of Russia's demands in this war have been achieved. Now, why relative so far?
¿Por qué lo de relativa hasta el momento? Bueno, por un lado, evidentemente.
Well, on the one hand, obviously, because it wasn't able to establish all of its conditions, such as the annexation of Kherson and Zaporizhia. But it's much less than that, because in reality, Russia's conditions in this war were not about taking those territories or seeking expansion, but about creating a stable security framework for its citizens, for the Russian state. And while an agreement of this kind would surely create a situation safer than before the start of the war, with NATO's expansion, because this establishes, in Ukraine's case for the moment, a break on NATO, this does not inexorably mean that NATO, and above all the Europeans, will not soon begin, through Ukraine once again, a process of remilitarization and military confrontation with Russia.
Y un proceso de confrontación militar una vez más con Rusia, ¿sí? En este sentido, si Rusia.
In this sense, if Russia, through a full agreement, could conquer all the mentioned territories, including Kherson and Zaporizhia, and all the territories up to the Dnieper, it would seem more secure. But even that would not necessarily determine the end of NATO's advances or the end of European militarism. Therefore, in order to achieve a total victory, Russia must create conditions so that Europeans and the United States, and logically Ukraine as part of this scheme, as the puppet, as the proxy, but also all the other European countries close to Russia, such as Finland, which borders Russia, or Moldova, which borders the Transnistria region, practically part of Russia, as well as in the Caucasus, and even in Poland and Romania, with NATO missile bases. Well, only after resolving that underlying conflict could we then speak of a total Russian victory, because only then would the problems for Russian security completely disappear.
Por completo los problemas para la seguridad rusa. Con esta resolución genera un mejoramiento de su situación.
With this resolution, their situation improves. NATO is undoubtedly defeated, but it's a relative victory because the underlying problem doesn't completely disappear. And considering the militarism of the Europeans, the madness of the Ukrainian nationalists, and the possibility of the Democrats returning to the White House, with a government once again much more anti-Russian than Trump's, they could start everything all over again. Therefore, we clearly couldn't describe Russia's current victory as a total one if its problems start up again soon.
Los problemas para Rusia de aquí a poco. Entonces, Putin debe realizar una decisión.
So, Putin must make a decision. Either he validates this through a negotiation of the terms. The 600,000 troops are certainly not something he'll want for Ukraine's army. This is one of the reasons why I also describe this as a relative victory. An absolute victory would necessarily mean the total disappearance of Ukraine's armed forces, complete and absolute. Putin will be left with fewer troops. Whether their total disappearance will happen or not is something we can only determine once negotiations begin. And those negotiations could lead from relative victory to total victory, but they haven't started yet. So, considering the madness of the Ukrainian nationalists, their willingness to destroy their own country for the sake of fighting the Russians, considering the Russophobia of the Europeans and the British, the militarism and arms race initiated by Europeans and Britons, and considering the possibility once again of someone more anti-Russian than Trump returning to the White House, well, there arises the possibility of this conflict being reactivated. So, Putin must make a decision between a relative victory with this, the pacification of the conflict, and, from there, pursuing a political path to achieve a total victory, in the sense of creating the conditions for the disappearance of any possibility of this conflict being reactivated. To do so, he should obviously support pro-Russian political sectors in Europe in order to bring about the breakdown of the anti-Russian axis in Europe. Naturally, he should do what is necessary so that this future nationalist Ukrainian state either appears as a failed state or makes a turn toward the Russian sphere. We could also witness the Ukrainians turning toward the Russian sphere and establishing once again a pro-Russian government like Yanukovych's, or even something more like a Lukashenko-style government in Belarus. But all of that would happen in political terms. Russia then, also politically, after validating this agreement and a relative victory, should reach agreements with the United States regarding nuclear weapons, missiles on the European continent, and so on. And then, through political means, it could transform that relative victory into a total victory. That is one of the possibilities for Putin.
Esa es una de las posibilidades para Putin. ¿Cuál la otra? Realizar una apuesta.
What's the other option? To make a bet on a total victory now, all at once, through military means. To reject anything less, no, not without Kherson and not without Zaporizhzhia, no. Not without the total disappearance of the Ukrainian armed forces, no. Not without all the territories as new demands, not without all the territories of Ukraine up to the Dnipro, up to the right bank of the Dnipro, no. Not even that. And that way, yes, it could be done militarily, maybe, but with many risks, because obviously the continuation of the war, in addition to Russia's losses, creates the possibility of a direct war with NATO and the United States. That's when a bet on total victory through military means could be made.
Vía la mano militar. Conociendo a Putin, estas las dos alternativas de Putin ahora.
Knowing Putin, these are the two alternatives he has now. Knowing Putin, most likely, very likely, he will choose the first option, a relative victory and a total defeat. A relative victory for Russia and a total defeat for NATO. And then the political pursuit of Russia's total victory, neutralizing the possibility of security problems or a Eurasian conflict or one with the United States through political means. Knowing him, that's almost certainly the option.
Conociéndolo a Putin, casi seguro esa la opción. Muchos en Rusia seguramente rechazarán esto y querrán.
Many in Russia will surely reject this and want the military path to the end. Want Russia to establish through its military might a total victory and the absolute capitulation not only of Ukraine, but also of the European Union itself, and even in part of the United States, with the obvious risks that this option entails. So those are Russia's two options now, Putin's options specifically, what we could sum up as NATO's defeat, clear, total, and absolute. For the moment, Russia's victory is partial, relative, but with the possibility of a political negotiation and a total victory. Or as said, not accepting this and seeking militarily an all-or-nothing fight until Russia's total victory. Devastating, truly devastating.
Demoledores y demoledoras. Justo una hora vamos a redondear. En un ratito nada más.
Exactly 1 hour. Let's round it up. In just a little while, Fernando Moragan's show on DMP Geopolitics, our sister channel, will begin. Tomorrow we'll be back with our regular programming, and in that context, Juan Antonio Aguilar's show, yes, about artificial intelligence. And on Sunday, we'll be back here again with Fernando. Remember, on December 15th, for those demolishers in Argentina, there's a gathering organized by Eduardo Vior at El Pulqui Bar at 6 p.m., a geopolitics meeting for all followers, not only of his show, but of Demoliendo Mitos, of course.
Demoliendo Mitos, naturalmente, también todo el mundo invitado. Y recuerden, por favor, ayudar.
Everyone's invited too. And please remember to help us with the growth of both our sister channel, DMP, and our English channel, Demolishing Political Myths. Help us out there. We've reactivated TikTok, so please support us with the clips, the shorts, made above all to reach a younger audience in all these matters. So help us by subscribing to TikTok. It's completely free as well. Demolidors and Demolidoras, thank you so much for joining us. Beatriz Pulido, thanks for moderating. A kiss, a hug, and see you next time. Bye.
Un beso y un abrazo y hasta la próxima. Chao.